radical Islamic terrorists of Hamas. The world has witnessed an unspeakable...
Hamas unleashes a shocking assault on Israel, leaving hundreds dead.
The barbarism and the savagery stunning mankind.
Hamas taking hostages.
Israel responding, saying Hamas will bear the consequences of the attack.
זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק, נצטווינו. אנו זוכרים ואנו נלחמים.
It's an entire nation out there that is responsible.
אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם.
Very puzzled by the constant concern which the world is showing for the Palestinian people and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals.
תשמיד את עזה עכשיו, עכשיו. עזה הופכת לדרזדן, כן.
Dear Lord Rothschild,
Mr. Jones?
Yes?
Good afternoon. These are the Smiths. They're currently homeless and we're trying to find them somewhere to live.
Well, that's awful. I'm so sorry. Can we help at all? Maybe some clothes for the children?
That's very kind of you, but we're thinking more along the lines of your house.
What do you mean, my house?
I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights or political status of Jews in any other country. I would be grateful if you should bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation.
This is yours now. Everything else belongs to them.
You can't do this. This isn't right.
Lord Rothschild, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Chief Rabbi, distinguished guests, lords, ladies and gentlemen. I am so pleased to be here with you tonight and to be with you, Lord Balfour, on this special evening as we mark the centenary of the letter written by your great-uncle, which I believe to be one of the most significant letters in history. A letter which gave birth to a most extraordinary country, and a letter which finally opened the door to helping make a Jewish homeland a reality. It was a letter that is all the more remarkable when you consider its length, its context, and its sensitivity. First, it was exceptionally concise, with, as Lord Rothschild has said, just 67 words. Let us cast our minds back to the time of 1917, in an era of competing imperial powers, and with Britain still embroiled in the midst of the First World War. The idea of establishing a homeland for the Jewish people would have seemed a distant dream for many and been fiercely opposed by others. Yet it was at this very moment that Lord Balfour had the vision and the leadership to make this profound statement about restoring a persecuted people to a safe and secure homeland. Some people suggest we should apologize for this letter. I say absolutely not. We are proud of our pioneering role in the creation of the State of Israel. We are proud to stand here today together with Prime Minister Netanyahu and declare our support for Israel. And we...
Rabbis and archbishops, this is a momentous occasion. It marks a pivotal event in Jewish history, in British history, in world history. The history of modern Zionism is intertwined with the history of Britain, the actions and words of Britain. But for me, this is a deeply moving personal moment. In the beginning of World War I, one of the Zionist leaders, Vladimir Jabotinsky, approached the British government and asked to form a Jewish fighting force within the British Army. And after some consideration, the British government agreed. They gave them the task of being the Zion Mule Corps, which operated first in Gallipoli. It then became the Jewish Brigade, which sowed the seeds of the Israeli Defense Forces. The commander of that force was Lieutenant Colonel John Henry Patterson, a British officer. Patterson had never met Jews. Some 20 years later, Patterson met my father in the United States during World War II, and he joined him in advocating for a Jewish state. The partnership and the friendship they forged was so deep that my parents decided to call their first newborn, my older brother Jonathan, in honor of John Henry Patterson. John for him, Nathan for my grandfather. John Henry Patterson was the godfather of my brother, who was later to fall in Entebbe. Think about that. The first Jewish fighting force in 2,000 years. And the commander, the British commander, is the godfather of one of the future commanders in the Israeli Air Force. So Britain is intertwined with the birth of Zionism. But for me, this connection is deeply, deeply personal. But that connection has its roots right here in London. In this city, in 1900, Theodor Herzl, our modern Moses, the founder of modern Zionism, addressed the Fourth Zionist Congress that he convened here. He said this: England, free and mighty England, whose vision embraces the seven seas, will understand us and our aspirations. It is here that the Zionist movement, I'm sure, will soar to further and greater heights. Herzl's confidence was well-founded. At the time, British sympathy for Zionism was evident everywhere. You could hear it, you could read it actually. You can see it in the expeditions of the Palestine Exploration Fund, which Queen Victoria established to rediscover and map the land of the Bible. Alongside America, it was here in Britain where Christian Zionism preceded modern Jewish Zionism and kindled its fire. This is why Herzl, in whom that fire burnt brightest, believed that Britain would be the place where his sacred mission to establish a Jewish state would be propelled forward. And just as he predicted, 17 years later, on November 2nd, 1917, with the help of a genius diplomat, Chaim Weizmann, and his friend, Lord Rothschild, and others, Britain recognized the right of the Jewish people to our national home in our historic homeland. So exactly a century later, here in London, I'm privileged to speak as the Prime Minister of the state that Herzl foresaw and that these men fought to create. Without decades of immigration and hard work, without the courage and sacrifice that was needed to defend our lives and our liberty, the State of Israel would not have come into being. But it was the Balfour Declaration that galvanized international support for Zionism as never before and paved the path for Zionism's entry on the world stage. Now, a once stateless and powerless people has found its rightful place among the nations. Prime Minister May, the Balfour Declaration put Britain on the right side of history. In marking that declaration today, you are keeping Britain on the right side of history. The Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. לעולם לא נשכח את מעשי הזוועה שעשו לנו אויבינו. אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים. אני מדגיש, זאת רק ההתחלה. They've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
Israel has responded with fury. Fighter jets taking aim at targets in the Palestinian territory.
More than 10,000 people have been killed since this conflict began.
I'm definitely doing that.
מה שרואה עוד, וגם משהו שעדיין משאיר לי בו. אז הייתה משהו עם מה ידיעתו. ועושים. הכנראה שהיא מספיק, כאילו שהיום כבר כמה שעות בגיל עדיין לבו.
The U.S. is pressing Israel to shift to precise targeting of Hamas leaders rather than widespread bombing and ground.
For Benjamin Netanyahu, this moment of crisis is the culmination of a 30-year conflict over a failed peace process he has long resisted, over American pressure to come to terms with the Palestinians.
It's not going to happen.
And over the security of his country that he vowed to defend.
With all of this death and destruction, it's hard not to look back and say, where did the road turn? When did it become inevitable that we would head to this cataclysmic conflict? The second guessing is haunting.
Preparations are underway. We expect to see the president shortly.
For what he called an historic and honorable compromise.
30 years ago, a hopeful moment in the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians.
It's a day for optimism.
Two sworn enemies arrived at the White House to sign a peace agreement.
The deal was struck in secret by the principals.
Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, a former general, represented Israel.
Have now agreed to lay down their guns.
Representing the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat, the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization.
This is a historic breakthrough. Between Israel and the PLO, two national movements competing for the same space, and for the first time they're prepared to recognize each other.
Known as the Oslo Accords, supported by President Bill Clinton, it was designed to end years of violence by laying out a peace process, a deal that could give Palestinians their own state and land captured by Israel in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War.
It charts a course toward reconciliation between two peoples who have both known the bitterness of exile.
On the White House lawn, the tensions were visible.
To the last minute, there were issues. Rabin is insisting that Arafat can't come in anything that looks like a uniform. We're telling Arafat, you can't come with you don't bring a weapon. He's always had a pistol. You don't bring a weapon to the White House.
Then at a point, the president looks at Rabin and he says, "You're going to have to shake his hand." And Rabin looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. And he stood there for a moment.
And then the handshake. An image that would become iconic.
These hands that shook knew nothing but to shoot, the trigger, the bullets, the bombs, fight.
But in Israel, an outcry against the peace process had been building among the ultra-religious right-wing and security-minded conservatives. The face of the opposition, the 43-year-old leader of the Likud party, Benjamin Netanyahu, known as Bibi.
The PLO Islamic State, 15 minutes from Jerusalem or 5 minutes from Tel Aviv, is a prescription not for peace, but for dangerous and renewed conflict.
Week after week, Netanyahu watched the protests build.
We're demonstrating against the inability of the government to maintain order in this country and to protect the rights of Jews living in their own land.
Concerned a Palestinian state would pose a security risk to Israel, Netanyahu maneuvered the growing anger into a political force.
Netanyahu saw a moment of betrayal and peril and an agreement that would never and could never work.
He did not believe in the possibility of a deal with the Palestinians. He didn't trust them. He didn't like them. He doesn't. And he doesn't want to have a deal with them. He didn't want to have a deal with them.
Suicide bomber boarded the bus.
At the time, among the Palestinians, there was also a rising faction opposed to the peace process.
The car bomb was aimed at killing the maximum number of Israeli schoolchildren.
A recently formed Islamic militant group started setting off suicide bombs inside Israel. Its name, Hamas.
When the Oslo Agreement is signed, most Palestinians said, let's give this a chance. But there was that core constituency among Palestinians who said, the peace process is a sham, it can never succeed, only armed struggle can liberate Palestine, and Hamas became the embodiment of that sentiment.
Hamas's founding declaration called for the destruction of Israel and condemned all attempts at negotiation.
It was another test for the already strained Middle East peace process.
Their increasingly brazen attacks would fuel Israeli opposition to the peace talks and the rise of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Arafat is a very weak reed indeed. He gives cover to the Hamas, he makes a pretense of fighting them, but effectively allows them to attack us with impunity.
Mass protests reinforced opposition to the accord from right-wing groups.
Netanyahu's opposition movement reached a fever pitch in October 1995, when tens of thousands crammed into the center of Jerusalem. From a balcony overlooking Zion Square, he addressed the crowd. The crowd was with him as he attacked Yasser Arafat. And then the government of Yitzhak Rabin.
אני אומר כאן לממשלת ישראל שמתרפסת בפני האיש הזה.
There's a really ugly character to it. The level of vitriol, the anger, the scope of these demonstrations, the kind of incitement, the portrayal of Rabin, dressing Rabin in Nazi uniforms or putting a keffiyeh on him.
There were moments when Netanyahu was advised that, there are real nutcases in the national religious camp, that we see that we need to calm down, even gesturally. Netanyahu never did that. He never did that, to his enormous discredit.
Then, a month later, at the end of a rally of his own, Yitzhak Rabin was gunned down. The assassin, a right-wing Israeli Jew.
One lone gunman was taken.
Yigal Amir.
Truly shocking news from the Middle East tonight. Israel's Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin has been assassinated.
An evening spent dreaming of peace turns into a national nightmare.
Outside the hospital, the crowd began to chant, "Bibi is a murderer."
From Tel Aviv, where this evening there is...
The sign says, "Bibi, Rabin's blood is on your hands."
An assassin has taken yet another world leader away from us. It was just after the biggest peace rally in Tel Aviv.
Rabin's widow blamed Netanyahu for contributing to her husband's death.
The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin has also produced shock in the Palestinian community.
And said so on worldwide television.
Your husband pointed the finger at Mr. Netanyahu and said, you must stop this incitement.
Yeah.
To what extent do you blame Mr. Netanyahu and the Likud for what has happened?
I do blame them. In a rally in Kikar Zion in Jerusalem that showed him in the uniform of a Nazi. So Mr. Bibi Netanyahu, now we can say from here to eternity that he didn't support it and didn't agree with it, but he was there and he didn't stop it.
Netanyahu's close advisor at the time vehemently disagrees.
Your prime minister was a martyr for peace, but he was a victim of hate.
After Rabin's death, the peace process he had championed was in jeopardy. His successor, Shimon Peres, would now try to win an election to keep it alive. That meant facing Bibi Netanyahu. whose standing in the polls had fallen in the wake of the assassination.
People who spoke to him in those days have said that he thought that his career was over.
Then, as election day neared,
10 kilograms of explosives reduced this commuter bus.
Hamas had struck again. The number 18 bus right through the heart of Jerusalem.
Bombs packed with nails and shrapnel exploded in
This morning, the sound of sirens again interrupted the morning.
6 days later, the number 18 bus again.
Police combed the hellish wreckage for clues about a suspect who never...
The bus bombings were part of a series of Hamas attacks that killed more than 60 people and injured hundreds.
Israelis could not believe the morning news. Another bloody Sunday.
A suicide bomber has once again blown up a city bus.
Israelis lost faith in the process, in that process. One of the slogans that came from grassroots was, "This peace is killing us."
We see terrorism exploding in our streets, literally. So the only thing that we can do is not to continue on a failed course. This is bound to lead to more and more terrorism. That's exactly what's been happening.
Netanyahu began to climb in the polls.
He was able to speak to the masses and translate the horror of suicide bombers into political power and say, I will be able to solve this. I am strong. I come from a military background. I have the experience and the spirit to stop suicide bombers.
There are many ways of fighting terrorism, but the first decision is to fight it.
Netanyahu had railed against the Oslo Accords and promised security to the growing number of Israelis scarred by the violence.
The difference between Mr. Netanyahu and the current
It worked.
Prime Minister Shimon Peres is a mere fraction of 1%.
Benjamin Netanyahu is on his way to the United States for his first visit since becoming Israel's prime minister.
Benjamin Netanyahu's dealings with the President of the United States will be of intense interest.
Just over 1 month later, Prime Minister Netanyahu was at the White House.
Prime Minister Netanyahu will hold a joint news conference after they meet.